Hello everyone, welcome back to another remote sensing lecture video. And in this lecture video I want to continue our discussion on training data criteria by talking about the idea of accuracy. Right, and I think even though a lot of books use the term accuracy, I actually think it's kind of a misnomer because it makes you think something a little bit different. I think really a better term for this would actually be metadata. Right, metadata meaning data about the data. And I'm going to sort of explain this through some real life examples that I've actually worked through. And so when I say accuracy meaning metadata, what I mean is that you need to make sure your data is properly, I don't know what that says, but it doesn't say properly. Properly labeled and stored. Okay, so I'm going to tell kind of an anecdote here as to why this is actually very important. Okay, but first I want to go through an example of good. Right, good would be, so let's say that we're going through that example we went through before where we're digitizing water and for forest or vegetation and urban, right? And so a good example would be to name things like, for example, water underscore 1, water underscore 2, right? Veg underscore 1, right? Urban underscore 1, right? So we kind of know what class it is and we know what point it is in the sequence. Okay. Let's talk about bad. Right. Let's assume we have these same 5 points, right? TP underscore 1, TP underscore 2, TP underscore 3, TP underscore 4. Right now, if you were to say walk away from your computer for even say 5 minutes, right? You can imagine how quickly this would get horribly confusing, right? You have no idea what is this, right? TP, oh, it's training point. Well, that's not helpful, right? Now, the reason I bring this up is twofold. One, if you were to go with the GPS route, right, a lot of times the GPS will actually default to something akin to GPS underscore 1. Right, this is typically a pretty close to standard default. So if you don't take the time to make the changes, right, to something like water, veg, and urban, you're going to give yourself a major headache later on. And I can tell you this from experience, right? I was working with some people on a project, and they had collected training data from long before I started there. And I was grabbing some historical imagery to work with for an area. And they gave me their data points, and it literally had T underscore 01, R underscore 01. And I went and I asked them, what do these mean? And they're like, oh, T stands for transect and R stands for rain. I'm like, that's super helpful, right? We were trying to classify vegetation. So then I had to go back to the reference map that they used and figure out what they were standing in to be able to convert these to meaningful labels. Okay, so hopefully that sort of makes sense. And this happens, right? GPS, this is the default name if you don't change it. And sometimes people who aren't thinking about it will pick things like transect and rain, which have absolutely no value to any sort of classification. The other thing I want to talk about is file structure, right? Where do you actually store your data? Right. So for example, if we have all of these, right, if we store them in something like junk folder, right? You're going to sort of think, oh, this is really bad data, we shouldn't use it. Or if you put it in like a folder called like temp data, or if you leave it in your downloads, right? Making sure that you know where things are and using appropriate folder names is going to help you out in the long run. Right? I can't tell you how many times I've fallen prey to this one in particular, where I make a folder called temp data to keep everything I'm working on, but then I don't move the finalized copy over. And then I have a really hard time going back and figuring out, okay, well, which one did I actually end up using? Because everything in this is, temporary. So again, I know this seems kind of straightforward, but you'd be surprised how often in everyday life this stuff, this metadata accuracy stuff, how often this gets overlooked and how quickly it can cause you a lot of problems. And it's the same thing that we talk about when we talk about saving our imagery, right? When we're going through the steps in the lab, right? Picking a good file name, right? It all sort of blends together, and it's just important to keep track of things. It's basically the point of this. So hopefully that made sense. And as always, please reach out. Thank you.